Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is a video that I thought I really should make because there's two sides of this entire thing that I think equally hold merit to a certain extent. So what exactly do I mean by how to use hypotheticals? This is what I'm titling this video, how to use hypotheticals, because I've been in enough debates and I've encountered a certain amount of people that I've noticed and I guess, inspired the creation of this entire video. So to put it simply, when you hear how to use hypotheticals, the main thing that people are going to think about is the whole, have you ever met a person that's basically like so close-minded or so like they can't entertain hypotheticals and it's really fucking annoying, and you just think to yourself like either this person is incredibly stupid or they don't want to entertain your hypothetical because you know that if they were to do that, their entire worldview and ideology would simply collapse. So, they give the typical excuses. What excuses are those? Basically, oh, that would never happen. That's just, unrealistic. That's just, yeah, like basically it would never happen. So I'm not even going to bother entertaining that. So basically you just see a lot of cope, just a lot of cope, basically. And that's really dumb because you would imagine that if this person had such a sophisticated worldview, such a sophisticated, like ideology, they shouldn't be scared of any hypothetical that's thrown their way. And they should be able to explain to you why the hypothetical doesn't make sense. Because again, if your ideology is solid, there shouldn't be a conceivable thought or situation that's made where everything in your worldview would simply fall apart. And if you were confident, you could simply go out of your way to, debunk these hypotheticals and, put your ideology on top. But they refuse to do that. On the one hand, I'm also somebody that doesn't think that hypotheticals just for hypotheticals' sake makes you a smart person. And I'm going to defend the other side a little bit, but here's what I think. Only under this context is it merited that you're, I guess in a way, allowed to dismiss hypotheticals, but not really dismiss hypotheticals. I still believe that you have to entertain hypotheticals. But if you're going to say that somebody's hypothetical doesn't make any sense or it has, no sort of like actual structure to it, then you should go out of your way to do that. So MBTI wise, I'm an INTP, and I know a lot of people don't necessarily know a lot about that. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about like cognitive functions, just to like put in perspective everything that I'm thinking of right now. So as an INTP, I work with TI and NE. Those are my top two functions. TI is basically introverted thinking. NE is basically extroverted intuition. I have a fuller video discussing cognitive functions of an INTP like way down my channel if you want to find that video. But just for the sake of this video, I'm only going to talk about like those first two functions. So basically, as an INTP, I make hypotheticals that I dismiss all the time in my own head. So this is what I'm trying to illustrate when I say that I don't think hypotheticals are like worthy just for like hypotheticals sake. So basically with introverted thinking, I try to find the, logical internal consistency in like any sort of like thought pattern and whatnot. And with extroverted intuition, I generate possibilities and, ambiguity and basically a bunch of like speculations. I will use my TI to weigh the pros and cons of every single hypothetical that my mind generates. And I try to pit the one that has the most, consistency towards it, the most, like, stability and, rock hard foundation, you could say. Even though I have a video freaking shitting on foundationalism, but yeah, I'm using simplified language here for this case. So basically what I'm trying to say is there comes a point with hypotheticals where you're kind of just question begging. And I've seen this a lot with religious people and theists. Every single time we're having a conversation and they're trying to pick my atheist, like secular way of thinking. And I'm recalling one conversation I had with somebody where, he proposed a hypothetical that if God exists, basically his essence, so to speak, would be different from that of a human. And I already struggle a lot with metaphysics because when I see a lot of metaphysics, at least in pertaining to the essence of something, it's just a lot of like, like this is where hypotheticals are put on the max, and it's just like flowery language that doesn't actually explain anything whatsoever. But back to what I was originally saying. He said that if God did exist, God would operate under a different sort of, I guess like essence in comparison to like a human being. And I said I can't accept that hypothetical because I don't believe there is a separation between God and human beings, because I believe that God was a creation by human beings in order to cope. So I can entertain all the hypotheticals about God's nature, God's essence, and I buy typical, like, like atheist arguments about like omniscience paradox, omnipotence paradox. And before anybody wants to say that, oh, there are debunks to that, okay, fine, maybe I can make like a separate video about how I particularly feel about those things. But, in this case, I don't believe the nature of God is credible. So even if you're going to give me like all these hypotheticals, or, oh, God, operates basically on a different sort of way that like a human just, I don't know, like can't see, then sure, I can entertain those hypotheticals, but you do realize that I'm going to entertain those hypotheticals in the same way, let's say, of like, oh, what is my Hogwarts house? What is, who would win in a fight between SpongeBob and Goku? Because that's sort of been like, like a funny meme that you could have seen online like some time ago. And basically all these like hypothetical who would win in these like anime fights or against like these sort of like cartoon characters, you do realize that when you bring up God to me and a lot of this like metaphysical garbage about like essence, I struggle a lot with essence. I already have my video talking about, nominalism. So if you'd like to see me like expand upon that, yeah, you can go watch my video about like nominalism, and perhaps I'll make a separate video talking about like why I think like the whole notion of like essence in terms of like metaphysics is like, super garbage to me. Then yeah, I'll just go ahead and do that. But, to get like back on track to like, the topic, I can entertain hypotheticals, but it comes to a point where it's just like, I kind of just think that like, you're begging the question. Of course, if you define anything into existence and we go off with those rules, those arbitrary rules that you defined, then obviously anything can be true. So I think much like how I said as an INTP that I dismiss my own hypotheticals all the time, I'm gonna dismiss your hypotheticals if I don't see them driving a punch to you like actually proving anything. You can find Christians that reject a B theory of time, and if you don't know what that is, it basically claims that when it comes to time, the past, the present, and the future are all equally real. And you can see why they would want to reject this, because if there was always an existing universe, past, present, and future, happening on some sort of like infinite loop, then that would destroy the notion that the universe was created by some sort of God, some sort of, creator. But hypothetically, an afterlife, an eternity in heaven and hell somehow gets a pass. Like, give me a break, bro.